In 1941, the state of Washington made a decision that makes no sense on paper. They had a bridge that was barely a year old, the third longest suspension bridge in the entire world, and they spent $646,000 to cut it into pieces. For 7,000 tons of scrap steel, they got back $295,000. That is a loss of $350,000. It would have been cheaper, literally cheaper, to just let the whole thing drop to the bottom of the Puget Sound and walk away. So why would a state, in the middle of a world war, when steel was worth more than almost anything, pay to destroy something brand new? The answer starts with a bridge that moved in the wind like a living animal. We checked. To understand why they were tearing her down, you have to know what it took to put her up. And that part, nobody talks about. The Tacoma Narrows is not a friendly piece of water. It is over 200 feet deep in the channel, and 4 times a day the tide rips through it at better than 8 miles per hour. That is a current strong enough to knock a grown man off his feet and carry him away. In 1938, when Pacific Bridge Company and the crews from Bethlehem Steel showed up to build here, the foundations they needed were the deepest ever attempted for a bridge, nearly double the record set at the Golden Gate the year before. Think about what that actually means for the men on the job. To anchor the piers, they built massive floating caissons up at the Seattle docks and towed them down to the site. Then they had to sink them, dead straight, onto a seabed swept by that current. The first anchor they dropped weighed 570 tons, and the water still shoved it around like it was nothing. And then there were the divers, men in canvas suits and copper helmets that weighed close to 200 pounds, lowered into black water, working almost blind. They had a window of maybe 2 hours at slack tide, the few minutes when the current paused before it reversed. One veteran diver named Johnny Bacon, 15 years on the job, came up from 120 feet down and swore he had been staring at an octopus the whole time. That is the kind of work that built the towers. 2 towers, 425 feet of riveted carbon steel, deliberately bent 3 feet toward shore so they would pull straight once the cable load came on. They built her in 19 months. And here is the thing the crews already knew, the thing the public found out the hard way. She was wrong from the start. If you want to see exactly how an engineer predicted this disaster and got fired for it, stick with us, because that is coming. Take a second and hit subscribe, because this is the kind of story that got buried on purpose. The original design for this bridge came from the state's own bridge engineer, a man named Clark Eldridge. His plan was conventional, and it was solid. Deep stiffening trusses, 25 feet tall, the kind of structure that holds steady in wind. But it carried a price tag of around $11 million, and the federal moneymen did not want to pay it. So they brought in a famous New York engineer, Leon Moisseiff, to make it cheaper. Moisseiff threw out the deep trusses. He replaced them with shallow plate girders just 8 feet tall. On paper, it was elegant, slender, beautiful. In the water, it was a sail. A flat ribbon of steel stretched across one of the windiest straits in the region, with almost nothing to stop it from twisting. The workers felt it before anyone would admit it. The deck moved while they were still building it. It rolled and rippled under their feet on calm days, and they started calling her Galloping Gertie, half as a joke and half as a warning. Drivers crossing the finished bridge reported watching the car ahead of them disappear and reappear over the waves in the roadway. But the warnings were not just jokes from the crew. A federal field engineer named David Glenn looked at this bridge in the summer of 1940 and refused to certify it. He said the design was flawed. He was overruled by the people above him. And after the story broke in the Tacoma papers, Glenn was fired in January of 1941. He was right. They fired him anyway. On the morning of November 7th, 1940, in a wind of only about 42 miles per hour, Gertie started to twist. Not sway, twist. The whole deck corkscrewing, one side lifting while the other dropped, until the steel could not take it anymore. The main cables were thrown nearly 100 feet into the air. The center span tore loose and dropped into the Narrows. The towers, 425 feet of steel, were left standing but ruined. Their bases bent 12 feet over toward the shore. 4 months. That is how long she lasted. And the moment she hit the water, a small-time insurance man 2 cities away realized he was in very deep trouble. His name was Hallett French. He was a Seattle agent, and he had sold an $800,000 policy on this bridge. Here is what he did with it. He pocketed the premium. Roughly $8,000 just slipped into his own account, and he never reported the policy to his company at all. Why would he? In his mind, it was free money. A bridge like this could never fall. Nobody collects on a bridge. Then the bridge fell. And when the state of Washington went to collect on that policy, the one they thought they had, there was nothing there. French was arrested for grand larceny in December of 1940. He was denied bail. By February, he was sentenced to 15 years in the state penitentiary at Walla Walla. He paid back about $17,500, served 2 years, got out for good behavior, and went to work at a shipyard. He bet that a bridge would stand forever, and he lost everything when it stood for 4 months. The state, at least, got luckier than French did. The bridge actually carried 22 separate insurance policies, the real ones, worth $5.2 million. The insurers came in low, offering $1.8 million. The state fought back hard, claiming nearly $4.3. And when the dust settled in August of 1941, they agreed on $4 million. Considering the piers alone had eaten up $2.4 million of the original budget, that settlement is the only reason this story is not a total financial wipeout. Quick favor while we are here. If you are still watching, drop a comment with where you are watching from, because we read them, and the machinery crowd always has the best stories. So now, the state has a wrecked bridge and a $4 million check. And this is where we get back to that decision that makes no sense. The salvage. In March of 1941, the experts ran the numbers. The scrap steel was worth maybe $206,000. The cost to take the bridge apart and get that steel out of the water, about 3 times that. They knew before they started that this was going to lose money. They did it anyway, because a ruined bridge cannot just sit there in a shipping channel. The work started in September of 1941, and it was as dangerous as building her had been. The towers came down first, then the cables. Picture this: men in cages, suspended out over the same 200 feet of water that killed the bridge, unwinding the wrapper wire from the main cables by hand and lowering it down section by section. A 1943 photograph from the State Archive shows 2 workmen simply walking out along the damaged cable. No fuss, like it was a sidewalk. The caption calls them fearless. That is one word for it. Then Pearl Harbor happened, in December of 1941, and suddenly steel was one of the most valuable things in the country. For a moment, there was hope. Maybe, with wartime prices, this salvage could actually turn a profit after all. It did not. By the end of the work, they had pulled more than 4,000 tons of steel out of the towers and around 3,000 tons from the cables and deck. 7,000 tons total. And the books still showed that loss of $350,000. Here is the detail that says everything. The salvage took about 29 months. That is almost exactly as long as it would later take to build the replacement bridge. They spent 2.5 years and $325,000. And at the end of it, the state's own historians admitted the truth. It would have been cheaper to let the salvaged parts drop into the Narrows. But they could not get all of it. And that is the part that is still down there right now. When the center span fell, it was deemed a total loss and left exactly where it landed. Too deep, too dangerous, too expensive to raise, especially with a war on. So it stayed. For more than 80 years, the largest pieces of Galloping Gertie have been sitting on the floor of the Puget Sound, some of them more than 200 feet beneath the surface. In 1992, the wreck was placed on the National Register of Historic Places, not as a monument, but to protect it from scrappers who wanted to finish the job. The official record calls it a permanent reminder of what happens when men build something without fully understanding the forces of nature. Divers go down there. In 2001, a technical dive team documented the wreckage at around 215 feet, working in the same brutal slack-tide windows as the men who built her. For decades, the ruins were one of the largest artificial reefs in the Pacific Northwest, crawling with octopus, wolf eels, and rockfish that turned twisted steel into a living thing. And here is the last twist, the one almost nobody knows. When they built the new parallel bridge in 2007, the construction dumped rock and dropped anchor chains right onto the old wreck. Divers who had watched over those ruins for 30 years say it was devastated. One man who had recorded the site since the 1990s and dove it again just last year put it plainly. He said about 90% of the marine life is gone from what it used to be. The bridge that the water destroyed in 1940 is now itself being slowly destroyed by the bridge that replaced her. So that is the answer to the question we started with. Washington spent more to tear down Gertie than her steel was ever worth, because they had no choice, because a famous mistake had to be erased from the water, and because some lessons only get paid for the hard way. The men who built her did blind, freezing, 200-foot work to put her up. The men who scrapped her did the same work in reverse, at a loss, to take her down. And the part they could not lift is still down there in the dark, where the current never stops. Here is what we keep coming back to. Every figure in this story: the $350,000 loss, the 12-foot bent towers, the 15-year prison sentence. We checked all of it against the record, because that is the whole point of this channel. If you want the truth about the machines that built this country, and the ones still buried under it, subscribe and stay with us. There is a video on screen right now about another machine the water swallowed and never gave back. Go watch it.